What do you, Father Jenkins, think of Catholic children playing video games?
Whatever we can do to diminish the screen time the youngsters have, I think is a good step in the right direction. You know, we hear about the fairy tale Alice through the looking glass, or Alice falling into the rabbit hole. All too often, not only youngsters, but adults too, can get just drawn into that virtual world. It's almost addictive. That doesn't mean that everybody who gets involved with, so many people spend hours and hours just on the screen, okay? Not everybody loses his soul. It doesn't, just take the soul out of everybody. But it can. I mean, somebody has to be very careful. And the video games are produced today to be very frenetic and to just command so much attention, to focus, right? One can actually lose contact with the outside world and just be so mesmerized with what's happening on the screen that becomes the real world for them. And we've known young people who've just gotten to the point where they look upon the time away from the video games as time lost. That, as far as they're concerned, their real lives are spent playing the video games. And any time that they're almost have to be forcibly drawn away from them, a mother calling them to the supper table or whatever else, or get their homework done, they fight it. They resist. They don't even hear. Sometimes the parents have to intervene even to get their attention because they're just so completely, well, again, mesmerized, almost hypnotized by the thing. You hear about cases where the people experience withdrawal, honest to goodness withdrawal symptoms when the video games are taken away from them. Some can even get violent in the sense that if they're used to playing games involving, and there are so many of them, that involve violence, dismemberment, killing, right?
Yeah.
The war games are very graphic. These are things that one might not see anywhere other than a battlefield. And yet they're putting their 7, 8, 9-year-old children in the midst of that battlefield. And they're seeing people being blown apart, being shot down. And the more killing, the better. The more killing you do, the better. Otherwise, it's a matter of glorifying crime, like Grand Theft Auto 4, glorifying crime and criminals. So the savagery can really be very damaging psychologically to a youngster. We see these acts of violence being perpetrated these days, and so often they've discovered that the young people did them, were addicted to these violent video games. And so much that they might even have lost the ability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. They prefer the fantasy to the reality. They have power that they don't have otherwise. They're able to do things that they would never be able to do in reality, but they can do it on the screen, right? So virtual reality can be there's a big difference between virtuous reality and virtual reality, right? There's not an awful lot of virtue in so much of the virtual reality. Now, if there were some traditional Catholic video games that would be instructive and would promote virtue, I'd be in favor of them. But even that can be excessive, right? So I'm not saying that parents should take away entirely all the children's time on, let's say, playing the video games. But I think parents just have to be very careful to recognize that these things have a certain allure of their own. They can be addictive, and they've got to be wary of their children getting to the point where you have to pry the controller out of their hand to get them to come to the table even to eat lunch. And all they can think about when they're away from the game is getting back to the game. It's constantly on their mind. Wherever they are, whatever else they're doing, their minds are back there. And they can't wait. They're itching to get back to it, get that controller back in their hands again. Parents should not allow that children to get to that point.
What would you recommend, Father? We heard from some parents who maybe in their own personal homes have been very careful in this regard, but maybe when their children go to their friend's house, there are video games there, even Catholic friends, even Catholic fathers, as you mentioned. It's not just only young people. But what would you recommend a parent do in that case when they're finding that just going over to friend's house, hanging out with other even traditional Catholic people their age, they're seeing all of these video games and getting caught up in them and playing them at other houses?
Well, there are certainly video games they shouldn't be playing under any circumstances. So if they find out they're playing games that glorify criminality and violence, savagery, impurity, immodesty, they should just say, no, my son is not going to do this. If that's what he does when he goes to your house, he's not going to your house. Yeah. But I mean, if it's otherwise something innocent, I'd say, fine, let them do something that in itself is something innocent. But again, if it's going to be something done in hours on end, where it becomes, well, they used to talk about the television as the electronic babysitter, the plug-in drug. Mary Wynn's very famous book on the television as the plug-in drug. Parents might say, well, I can park my kid there, and he parks his mind there, and I know where I'll find him an hour from now. He'll be glued to that set. That's a crime, as far as I'm concerned. Parents really need to spend time with their children. Mothers need to spend time with their daughters, and fathers need to spend time with their sons. And they need to be out looking in the creek for frogs. They need to be out in the woods doing things that boys should be interested in doing. The dads really need to lead the way in that. Unfortunately, sometimes the dads are just, they say, too busy to give that time to my son. So, this keeps him out of trouble. He's not out stealing hubcaps. He's not out knocking off banks. He's just playing a video game here. And that keeps him safe, but does it really? And not really. It's still doing something to his mind. And a father who's doing that has got to drop the ball. He's failing his son, failing the family. He should be interested in the son's life, and it should not be a life lived on the video screen or in a video console. He has to keep his son interested in real life, real things that God made, not just artificial constructs that we've fabricated to, what should I say, confine our children to the, so many square feet of living room space in front of the screen.